Hello everyone, we hope you are doing great. Welcome to this following session on GRASP. Today we have a very extraordinary speaker on GRASP, and this guy is from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the mother of all learning monuments. Massachusetts Institute of Technology has stood world rank 1 over years together, and Anuj managed to crack the code and he entered in this institution to pursue his undergrad in physics. And it's one of the biggest challenge for the international students, but Anuj still managed to crack it. Coming from Nagpur, Anuj cleared all the examinations, competitive examinations, and despite having an option to study in IIT Bombay Computer Science, Anuj chose to pursue physics in Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And eventually, after joining Indian Institute of Science, he gave required competitive exams and went into Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he pursued his physics over there. Other than that, he also has a medal in his honor. The medal he won for the country, International Physics Olympiad. In this competition, he won the silver medal. And in the following session, we are going to talk about Anuj's journey to Massachusetts Institute of Technology and how his journey has been so far and what he looks forward to do in the future and what he has how he wants to show us MIT through his own eyes. So welcome Anuj, welcome for this exciting session.
Thanks for the great introduction.
So how did you, let us start with our first question, which actually it's quite a curiosity for a lot of us. So how does one get into MIT for pure science and engineering? And what does MIT look for in an international students and how to avail these scholarship?
So I can start off by saying that I went to MIT as a transfer student, which means I was already at a different institution, which is, as you mentioned, IISc. So the process is slightly different from people who show up for the first year at MIT versus people who join like me. Because when I was admitted in order to do physics versus people who are admitted like as just open undergrads, like they can choose any major that they want. So the process is slightly different. At least from many of my peers from India did international Olympiads, because it's very hard to like distinguish yourself from other applicants. And these international standardized tests, they are very hard to get into because you have to like clear many exams and then go on to represent your country at an international stage and compete with students from other countries, which makes it very hard to get a medal. And it's one way of like showing any institute like MIT, for example, that you are good at least what you say you think you are good at, which could be math, physics, could be computer science or chemistry, for example, whatever. So it's very typical for like International Olympiad participants to go on to join very good American universities, like could be Harvard, could be some other school as well.
That's amazing. And can you speak about your journey to pursue MIT? Like what was your early progress, interest, motivation, exams taken, how you applied?
Yes.
And how did the National Olympiad and the IISc help you in this process?
I can start when I was in like 11th and 12th grade. I was like obviously studying for the IIT, but at that point I had become very interested in like physics. I first went to participate in the Asian Physics Olympiad when I was in 11th grade. And that was a very important learning experience for me because it sort of cemented the belief in me that I really like doing physics and that's what I wanted to do. So in 12th grade, along with preparing for the JEE, I was trying to see if there's good opportunities to do physics because a lot of really good physics research was happening in the US at that time. So I gave like SATs, both the English one and the subject exams, and like wrote a bunch of essays explaining how I'm passionate about physics and so on and so forth. And not only that, I actually applied to 17 universities in hopes that I would at least get into one, because like the probability grows as the number grows, right? But I didn't actually get into any of them. which was not great because all of the effort I spent into applying as a freshman didn't bear any fruit. But at least I didn't have to give SATs and stuff again. So I decided to go to IISc to do physics because it's one of the best institutes in India. They have some very good faculty members. But even at that point, I thought I had a very strong interest in, for example, philosophy and other humanities subjects, which wasn't being met very well at IISc. And the research culture um, was something I wanted to explore a bit more, how it was outside India. So I applied as a transfer student, this time only to 5 universities. Again, I didn't get to any of them except MIT. So if you do the math, it's like one school out of 22, which is not great odds. But hey, I got into at least one school, and that's what you need. The thing that helped me a lot was in 12th grade, I also went to the Asian Physics Olympiad and I had a gold medal there in China, and I had a silver medal from the International Olympiad, as you mentioned. And I had some very good letters of recommendations from professors teaching courses at IISc. Like in particular, Professor Subrata Mukherjee's letter I thought would have been really good, as I did pretty well on his classes, and I was also starting to do some research work with him while I was a first year student.
Well, that's amazing, Anuj. That's really nice to know. And can you explain about your academic life in MIT, which involves the courses of physics which you took, how the major minor credit system works, and which courses interested you the most?
So the way major minor system work is you would declare at least one major, and then you can take up to two majors and two minors. So my first major was physics, so I was obviously very interested in it. And then you have some specific requirements decided by the majors that you have to take these classes. Usually there's quite a bit of flexibility in deciding which specific combination you want to take. So if you're interested in some specific aspect of physics, you can take more classes from that. For example, one of my favorite classes was general relativity, which I took as a sophomore, which is second year. So first year of me joining MIT. And this theory was developed by Einstein and people after him to describe how gravity works. And I thought it was a very beautiful course, and I really like the math that goes into it. I became interested in differential geometry, and went on to do some research on black holes for about 2 years after that, based on what the course taught me.
So can you tell more about your research in MIT and your progress?
So MIT has a very strong undergraduate research tradition. In particular, you can get paid for doing research, which is pretty rare. Even at places like Harvard, it's rare for people to get paid for doing research work. So I started, as I mentioned, working on black holes. And I did that for about 2 years, and we wrote some papers which have been sort of popular and have been getting good citations and stuff. And I really enjoyed doing the work because it was intellectually challenging, but it was also in some sense relaxed because you could like ponder about a question for many months. There were no production deadlines from your boss yelling at you if you didn't do your job correctly, which I always find to be a very nice change of pace. And after that, I worked a bit for about a year on like these new class of materials called semi-metals, because I wanted to like explore different kinds of physics, and like the physics of metals is very different from the physics of black holes. But the one of the things that helped me a lot was MIT professors' inclination to design research projects so that undergraduates can actually contribute instead of just a reading project where you would read something and the professor would help you. Here you are actually creating new knowledge or engaging on like cutting edge problems, which is a very nice thing because the professor has to put in a lot of effort in order to make sure that the project is at a level where a student can actually contribute. Even someone who is like second, third year, who hasn't had a very strong exposure to research previously.
And what are the opportunities did MIT place on your table for your research or anything apart from research?
Yeah, so MIT has very strong opportunities to like engage in extracurricular stuff like clubs. One of the things I did was I was a member of the philosophy club where we would host movie nights. So we would host a movie and then a philosophy professor typically would come and talk about the philosophical aspects of that movie. Many people played sports or they would build rockets, they would build like cars that run on solar cells. And MIT had very strong funding, so you could do all of this. And there was never a question of whether, hey, is there enough money to buy a new engine for the car we're trying to build? There's always money. There's always support from professors if you get stuck about something, which was very nice. I played a lot of music, for example, and we had very good instructors. For example, I was in a drumming group where we played Senegalese drums, and our instructor was a person who had come from Senegal to the US to play drums. So there was a lot of support for extracurricular activities of all sorts, including sports, things related to curriculum, like building a car or something. If you're a mechanical engineer, doing things like playing music, just hosting events more closely related to major. That was one aspect. The other aspect, as you mentioned, was research. So every semester there would be a public listing of all the research projects that are available to undergrads. So if you just wanted to try something, you could get one, or you could ask a professor for a research project, and once they gave you a project, you could get paid for doing the research work. The third thing I would like to mention was there was a lot of opportunity to engage in education beyond your major. Like you could just pick any class, and if you thought you had enough like prerequisites to understand what was going on, nobody would stop you, which was very mind-blowing as someone who was more introduced to the Indian education system, where it's very weird for like a physicist to take classes economics in history or whatever you fancy.
Well, that should have been a fantastic experience, man. And coming to our next question, what are the challenges you faced in MIT, and how did you manage to cross over that barrier? It can be in academical, or it can be in your personal and lifestyle, work-life balance, and all these areas.
Yeah, one of the first barriers was just getting used to American culture, because you're in a new country, you've never lived there before, and now you have to sort of adapt to living in a very cold place in a country where you're not very familiar with, at an institution where a lot of people had time bonding together as freshmen, and I came in as a second year, so that was a bit difficult, sort of adjusting. So for the first few months, that was a bit difficult. However, I think academic life-wise, it's not as bad. But there's lots of support. If you get stuck, if you need extra time on your projects, you can always go and ask for help. You can ask for extensions, and there people are usually very generous with both their time and like with not being very strict with rules. I had trouble initially with like work-life balance. I even do now, because the whole place sort of encourages you to work very hard, because you see other people working very hard. So it has a cumulative effect. You get sort of peer pressured into taking more classes, sort of doing more project work. So at your peak, you could be taking like 5-6 classes, doing one research project, and like grading for some other class while being in a club. So it's a lot. It's very intense. So it's definitely not the kind of life you'd enjoy if you like a very slower pace of living. Things hit you very fast, so you have to get used to working. So it was a bit of a learning curve for me in terms of getting used to, again, to sitting down every day and doing homework. Like sometimes you would sit down to do homework for like 4 or 5 hours, and it would still be only half done. You'd have to come back another day and do another 5 hours and then maybe another 1 or 2 hours. So it was definitely challenging in terms of just getting around to, okay, I have this much work to do, how do I get around to doing it?
So since you explained all this, we are just curious, can you speak about your average day in MIT, like from morning to night, how it just went?
Usually you would wake up, have breakfast. I was in a fraternity. I don't know if you've heard of fraternities, but there are these things in American schools, like Greek organizations, where like people live together. So you decide how you want to live. So I would typically wake up, have breakfast, like go to lectures. Lectures would be there until the evening, like 4 5 p.m. Then I would come back to the house, have dinner, and then usually just go back on campus to do homework, or I would just do homework at home, and maybe for like 3 4 hours, and then maybe just chill with friends, play some pool, drink some beer, everyday stuff. um, and then like start all over again, except the weekends where you could do more fun stuff, like go to a concert or whatever else you would like to do.
So to the next question, which actually came from the IISc student community and which has been quite curious for all of us. How did you spend your life in IISc? You also spent your life in MIT. How did you find IISc different from MIT in terms of academics, course load, culture, social relations, and all?
Social, I mean, I can do one thing at a time, I guess. Academically, one of the things I mentioned was this tremendous flexibility that you could like spend 2 years being a physics major, and at some point you think, oh, you know what, I actually like computer science, but you can always switch. And once you get enough courses, then you could graduate as a computer science major. And another thing that is remarkable is not just that they have diversity, they have very, very good people. So like I was a philosophy major, and it has one of the best ranked philosophy departments in the world. So you could be taking classes from like world-class philosophers while also be taking classes from like someone who was a Nobel Prize winner in economics, for example, while being a physics major. And nobody would stop you because like you rightfully put the work in. So there was very little like administrative blockade that prevented you from doing things. Another difference that I noticed was the community in some sense was much more heterogeneous because people were there from all backgrounds. Like you had people from like different countries. Like for example, my room was next to a guy who lived from Mongolia. The other guy who lived next to me was from Sri Lanka. So you had all of this melting of culture, and that's why you get to know and learn a lot. And that's also true partly because you're in a major city in the US, so it affords you opportunities that won't be available in Bangalore. Like you could go out and like go to the Boston Symphony Orchestra for free because MIT paid for your ticket, and you are now listening to a world-class symphony comprised of like 80 people playing music written by a dude from 1600, and like they would be playing Beethoven, Mozart, you pick whatever, and you could go every week for let's say 3 4 months. And because the college ticket was so cheap, you could avail all these great cultural opportunities. It's not necessarily like an MIT thing. It's just being in a big US city lets you do things that you won't do otherwise. I've listened to way more Indian classical music in the US than I have in Nagpur, for example, because nobody would come and play in Nagpur, right? But they do play here, which is great. And in terms of social dynamics, people tend to be a lot more open here in terms of like exploring things, like doing more. A part of the reason is there's just more stuff to do. And I don't think it's necessarily a thing that's related to IISc. And part of it comes from just having exposure to people who think and do things in a very different manner. Like if you have a conversation with a history major, it would tend to be very different from someone who is a math major, for example. So there's more diversity, greater diversity of knowledge and consequently opinions.
And is there any way you think, is there any space do you feel MIT needs to improve on?
Yeah, I definitely feel that MIT needs some improvement, at least in the beginning. The thing is, US high school education is not as intense. So if you are smart, you can just cruise. And when the people actually show up for the first few years, they struggle a lot. So MIT has sort of a very sharp learning curve. So if you're not used to working very hard, you get you struggle quite a bit in the beginning. And they still are trying to figure out a process of like smoothing how like the transition from high school to MIT. Another thing they could definitely, within the humanities, there's a very uneven level. Like if you want to, let's say, study literature, MIT doesn't have as many classes. The good thing is they allow you to take classes at Harvard and vice versa. So if you can always avail many opportunities that exist at Harvard as a bigger university than MIT. Like MIT is a smaller school; it has lesser majors than Harvard does, especially in humanities. So you can always avail opportunities that way. But these things aren't promoted as heavily. For example, I took a lot of classes at Harvard since I was a philosophy major, but not many people who are computer scientists, for example, would take classes at Harvard, because why would you just take MIT class?
And what amazed you the most in MIT? And if you can recall some beautiful memories you had in MIT and want to tell to the world outside, we would be very happy to listen.
Yeah, one of the things that really amazed me, and it was, I think in some sense IISc also is progressing towards it, but sort of understanding a very horizontal level of organization. Like in the beginning, it was very unusual to call my professors by their first name, and they would be like 70 years old. And people were very open. Like you could go to an old famous professor's office and just knock, and they would typically answer your question if you had a legitimate question about coursework. Some of my fondest memories were like talking and like discussing physics with professors just out in the open. Like you could hang around in the lounge and professors would come around for tea and snacks, and you could just ask them whatever you feel like asking, without any burden of, would this person think I'm an idiot because I'm asking them this question? And they wouldn't think, oh, what a stupid question to ask. They would like actually spend time to explain it to you, which I thought was great. And it sort of broke the barrier of I am a student, he's a professor. It sort of made us into a collective whole of people like seeking knowledge and trying to understand how the world works. And that I thought was a very powerful feeling. Like you sort of, the sense of self dissolves into a bigger community of people who are interested in physics or whatever stream of knowledge you had.
Well, that's an amazing culture, especially that really gets the best out of students, and it provides real good confidence for the students to progress and as well as ask questions which are not answered. That is one space where most of us feel challenging. Like, are we asking the right questions? But seldomly we realize that there is nothing called as right questions, and we can realize that very well if we have an ecosystem to support us. And I'm very glad that MIT provided such a supportive ecosystem to you. And so for the students outside who aspire to join MIT, just like you, for any courses for that matter, but preferably physics, what words do you have to say for them?
I think it's sort of hard to get into MIT. Like you cannot bank on it. And I say that because I myself applied as a freshman and I didn't get in, and I tried again and I got in. Like I told you, the odds are 1 out of 22 for me, at least personally, which were terrible odds, right? I think a more important thing is sort of just figuring out what you like to do and like putting your best effort. Like let's say you figure out you really like biology, like there's been very good research at IISc for biology. So if you could go to IISc, you can always go to graduate school somewhere else. Like I know people who went to like Harvard or Princeton or wherever they felt like going to after they went to IISc or some very good Indian school. For example, people especially who like computer science or electrical engineering go to IITs and they go to very good schools in the US or Europe. It's just sort of being passionate about something and putting in the effort that goes a long way. It doesn't really matter like which institution you go to, as long as you're putting your best effort into it. At least that's the way I approached it. I didn't expect that like the second time I applied that I would get in, but I just applied because I thought, why not? Like I'm not losing out by applying, right? The only downside is you have to put effort away from like your JE studies or something to do it. And I did spend a significant amount doing it, but for the better. I think writing essays, it tremendously improved my vocabulary. For example, studying for SAT, um, which helped me read. Like I read much more fluently now. Yeah, and it also changes how you perceive, because you have to like think about how you are transmitting ideas. Let's say if you're writing an essay to get into MIT, which is a very different sort of thinking process compared to like picking options on an MCQ, because it doesn't involve reflecting on what you feel like. If the prompts asks you, what you think are the most important questions for you personally, you have to engage in a completely different thought process from here is a triangle, find the sign of this angle or something, right? Like it's less mechanical, it's more revealing to you to think about like your inner feelings. You have to reach in a bit to figure out what you actually like.
That's fantastic, Anuj. This was a fantastic session. And thanks a lot for being a part of GRASP platform. And I'm very sure members who have seen this have a lot to take, and that would definitely help them to take quality decisions in pursuit to some of the top universities in United States. And to the audience here, thank you for attending. Please like, share, and subscribe our GRASP channel for more such engagements. And Anuj, definitely we'll be looking forward for more such engagements in the future.
Thanks for inviting.
Thanks a lot.